thank you, everybody. You know, I had a long list of people I was going to thank. I'm not going to do that now because I'm going to leave someone out because every time I go out and do something socially with ULearn or core people, I meet 10 other people I should thank, so I'm just going to thank ULearn and core. You're really, really great people, and no, I don't say that to every group I work with. I try and keep that honest and from the heart. Okay. If you go to keynoting school, and I'm sure there is a keynote speaker school someplace, that's probably some online organization raking in the dough, but if you go to keynote speaking school, they will tell you, make 3 points, make them over and over again, because more than 3 points confuses the audience. And that's true. That's what they say. I take a slightly different approach. I'm going to give you between 300 and 3,000 points. You get to choose the 3 that you like, because I don't think you want me to sell you something. I think you want to know what it is I see. I'm in a very sacred position here right now. You have handed me the talking stick and said, we're going to give you an hour to tell us what you see. There isn't a person in the audience who couldn't talk for an hour about what you see in education, what you hope for in education, so on. But you have given me the talking stick for an hour, and I'm going to honor that by telling you as much as I can about what I see and what I've seen. And perhaps if I have a perspective to bring to you that is helpful, it is the fact that I've been doing this for a long time. I helped create one of the first masters in educational technology in the United States in direct response to desktop computing in the classroom so long ago. I had over 1,000 online students before the internet was to the desktop. How did I do that? God, it was ugly. We were using 300 baud modems, 300 baud modems. You could hear the letters land on the screen. But, you know, we got it done. It's what was there. It's what had to happen. I created the first teacher credential to be added to a standard teacher credential in the field of educational technology. I've just been at this a really long time, and what's really amazing to me is the fact that I haven't quit yet. Because a lot of the people I started out with, they're gone. It was just too much, and I understand that. And the only reason that I'm still standing is because I absolutely love being overwhelmed with new ideas. And every day is 20 new ideas. Every one of you knows 10 websites that I really should go look at that nobody else has seen yet, and I really enjoy that. So from that perspective, I'm going to tell you what I see and what I think would be helpful to you as you go forward. I want you to know that as I talk to people, you have this media literacy program. Clutch that to your heart. Don't let that one go. I'll tell you, that is very rare. It's very rare for an entire country to say, we honor students creating media and we will give you credit for it. But it doesn't happen in the U.S. I'm here to tell you that right now, and if the forces of conservatism should come along, and I don't mean to suggest they haven't already or they will or they're in the trenches, but if some forces come along that say, you know what, that's not really literacy, you push back on that, because that's absolutely literacy. So congratulations to you and for the rollout of this new program. You guys have just a really wonderful future ahead of you. Okay, a couple of things, please. You know what? We need to switch to this. Thank you. Okay. Please blog, text, do whatever it is you do, Twitter. I take it as a personal challenge to be so fascinating you either don't want to or you can't stop yourself. Either of those works for me. Please sign up for the Committed Sardine. It's free. There are about 10 of us that go out as cultural correspondents and find those issues and news stories we think would be interesting to you. Here are the 2 books that I'll be talking about that I've written. I'm going to wait 4 seconds because that's what it takes to pierce your neocortex and go to your reptilian brain where your buying power is. Of course, you know that because you have a media literacy program. If you want to download this presentation, please do so. It's right there where I've circled. As you can see, I own the version of Photoshop with the biceps option. So much easier than actually exercising. Who's got time anymore? Ladies and gentlemen, that is my second grade class. That is my second grade class. Where is Jason pandering to the teacher at a young age? Look at that, just shameless. Early training for getting a PhD, and there we are. Her name was Miss Phelps. Does she not look like a Miss Phelps? Look at that. This is the late 50s. This is that period in American history, anyway, where all second grade teachers look perpetually 65. And you've got the white shirt all the way up to the chin. She would wear wool skirts halfway down her calf in the sweltering heat of the summer because that was the proper thing to do. And because of that, she could sort of infiltrate the system. She looked so totally traditional. But the reality was, she is up on that screen because I absolutely adored her. She was one of those teachers that I would call a door opener. She was always looking for how each individual student learned. And then she would open that door for them. She was a great pedagogist. Long before Howard Gardner, she understood that every student learned and expressed himself or herself in their own way. She was just really great at that. We were using music and dance and those big fat crayons. I mean, it was just, she was absolutely wonderful. And because she looked so conservative, she could sort of get away with anything she wanted to get away with. And I will never, ever forget, we were studying dinosaurs, and I couldn't memorize their names. And she said, well, Jason, you like to tell stories. Why don't you name them and tell stories about them? And ever since then, they have been Stegosaurus Stan and Tyrannosaurus Tom. Does storytelling work in education? That was 50 years ago. I would say so. God bless you, Miss Phelps. You gave me a Walt Disney childhood. You and my two wonderful parents just made going to school a joy. She had that glint in her eye that just said, come on in, let's do an end run around the system, open some doors, have some fun, and learn everything we can. Thank you, thank you. While we're at it, I want to thank Mr. Hasselback. That's him on the left. He was my 10th grade music theory teacher. That's me on the right. Now, this is the 60s. This is that time in global history known as Beatlemania. And for those of you who are young, you will have to go to YouTube or find an old person, and you will have to ask them about Beatlemania. But it was absolutely amazing. It was one of the first huge international media events where we brought together sort of celebrity and big guitar amplifiers and TV and radio and the whole 9 yards. And it all focused on these 4 guys from Liverpool who made our parents apoplectic because they had long hair. Long hair meant that they had bangs that swooped down and touched the tops of their eyebrows, making all of our parents rush us off to the barber shop to give us crew cuts. It was really absolutely amazing. But here's the incredible thing about Beatlemania. Me and all my friends, so we're adolescent, young, red-blooded American boys in our teens, me and my friends were watching women go to a Beatle concert, listen to about 30 seconds of music, scream, and pass out. And we're saying to ourselves, you know, music looks like a good career. And off we went, bound and determined not to let our lack of talent stop us. And there was a lot of bad, loud music back then. But here's the thing, I actually had talent. I still have it. I don't have it so much in my fingers as I do in my ears. I had the ability, have always had the ability, to listen to music, sit at a piano, and figure it out almost immediately, automatically. So I ended up in a rock and roll band throughout high school, and I began to really fall in love with music. And I knew in my bones that my next step as a musician was to take Mr. Hasselback's music theory course. However, there was a hitch. The prerequisites said you had to be able to read music. I couldn't. I mean, I understood the system, every good boy deserves fudge, and it's an F sharp, but the song was over by the time I got to the note. You know, like most of you, you sort of understand how it works, but if you haven't done the hard work, to develop automaticity with reading music, then you can't really read music. And I explained to him, I said, you know what? I can't read music, but I think I can hear music. And he sort of looked at me, he says, okay, what does that mean? And I explained to him about being able to sit at a piano, put on a song, and I could hear it. And he said, opening a door for me, the way Miss Phelps opened doors for me, he opened a door for me and said, I will give you a listening test. And if you can pass this listening test, I will let you into my class. And I passed the listening test, and I got one of the best grades in that class. I did better than Marcia, the piccolo player, who really didn't want me in the class because I wasn't in the reading music club, so I shouldn't be there. And thanks to that man, I have written symphonies, string quartets, played in bands. You can go to jasonuller.com/music and find a whole bunch of interesting electronic music, rock and roll music, stuff that I've created. When GarageBand came out, there I was, just ready to go, and so on and so forth. And it's because he, when the system said, gotta read music, said, you know what, I don't care what the system says. I'm going to let this guy in my class. He didn't have to. There isn't a court in the world who wouldn't have supported his right to demand that students be able to read music in his music theory class, but he didn't do that. And because of that, I have had a life of music. And I'm telling you this for a couple of reasons. Number one, I have formally retired from my teacher retirement system a couple of years ago. And I'm busier now than I've ever been, but I actually do have moments where I sort of sit in a rocking chair on the front porch and get all philosophical and think about my life. And I'll tell you what I don't think. I don't sit there and say, God, I wish I'd given one more test. Wish I'd followed the standards more closely. If I'd just gone to a few more meetings, now I would feel good about myself. You sit there and say to yourself, or I sit there and say to myself, I hope to God I was as good a door opener as Miss Phelps and John Hasselbeck, and that's all I care about. We have that sacred interface between students and their imagination and the world, and we either listen to them and open that door or we don't. And when we don't, everybody loses, especially us. And I'm also telling you this for another reason. I believe our kids are banging on the door right now, banging on the door, saying, if you will just let me in with my iPad and my iPod and my mashup and my digital story and my anime and all those things they know how to do, if you will just let me in, just open that door and I will show you what I know. I will show you how I learn. I will show you things that you could learn if you will just open that door. And by and large, that door is closed to them. And nobody wins in that situation. So, if you'd really rather be shopping and you plan to fake a cell phone call so you can get out of here, I've made the single most important point that I wanted to make. Be a door opener, especially when it comes to kids, their imaginations, their creativity, and their digital technology. The bottom line is that we are at a very special juncture in history. Do we want our children to learn to live two lives or one? Two lives or one? In a lot of places that I go to work, they lead two lives. They lead a non-digital life at school and a digital life outside of school. And we're at the point now where the whole BYOD thing, the bring your own device thing, is going to come crashing down on us. And I mean, those people who have been proactive about it, good for you. That was really smart. Because the bottom line is a lot of schools aren't going to be able to afford to keep upgrading. I mean, after all, we convinced schools to go out and get laptops. Oh, forget the laptops, we need iPads. Oh, I mean, it's just, if we don't understand that this is endless, we've learned nothing. So we're going to shift who buys the stuff onto the students, but even more so, if we're smart about it, we're going to ask them to solve problems differently, individual by individual. It's going to shift from everybody open Word now to I don't care what you open. You probably went out on the web last night and found a really cool piece of software that no one else has here. Tell us about that. Everybody here has a customized workspace. If we were to line up all of our laptops or iPads, I would look, and each one of you would look slightly different because you've gone out and found some slightly different piece of software. I'm going to look over your shoulder and go, that's cool. Where'd you find that? And so on. And so that's going to be a good thing. And while we're at it, let's brand BYOD on, off. That is, let's have the guts and the foresight and the vision to look at our kids and say, you know what, we're going to turn our computers on now because we're going to do all this cool stuff in social studies and math, and now we're going to turn them off. To do what? Well, this is going to sound weird. Talk to each other. Let's brand this on, off. Let's do it now. It's a healthy thing to do. What are the building blocks of the new educational experience? Well, one certainly is that we're mobile, and it sounds almost cliche to point that out, but you know, don't lose your historical perspective here. The whole idea that we all now take our phone to work, it was science fiction 20 years ago. Connected, we're massively, massively connected. The implication there being that we now have a continuum of educational experience. On one end of that continuum is we can develop a personalized approach to learning for each student if that's what we want to do. That is so tailored to his or her strengths and needs that we can be that specific about it. On the other end of the spectrum, they can join learning teams from all over the world. So we have this broad spectrum of experience, educational experience, that are now available to students. I mean, there's really nothing stopping us. But the bottom line here really is, if we're mobile and connected, we're a school. Because I see a lot of people look at mobility, interpret mobility as meaning I'm mobile at school. I'd like to suggest to you that wherever you are at this point, if you play it the right way, you're at school. And if you do, and if you sort of mine that experience, you can make wherever kids go school. You do that by making them reflect on their experiences and weaving that somehow into sort of the general curriculum and dialogue and content of the things that they study. And not only that, but then the question becomes, who's teaching whom? If students are out at museums and so on, and they're making reports, and they're doing this, and they're doing that, and they're studying ecosystems, and they're studying local cultures and so on, don't they come back and say, okay, here's my unit, I'll teach the class today? Of course they do. And the reality is, when you combine those two things, what we have now is an immersive reality. It's sort of like this. If we had special glasses, we could look and see that each one of us right now is being pierced by hundreds, if not thousands, of electromagnetic signals. And it's radio programs and other people's cell phone calls, and it's people on the internet and so on. I mean, just shooting through us right now. The question is, how do we tune into that? How do we become a radio? Where's our dial to go, okay, I want that right there? Well, you can do that through an internet connection, absolutely. But there are new technologies coming out there like these. And there used to be one of them, and now there's about 10, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And what it does is combine, augmented reality combines RL, what's in front of you, with what you can download from the cloud, from VR, and put it on your screen at the same time. And those of you in media literacy, you want to be proactive about media literacy right now, you should be talking to your students about the fact that Starbucks, McDonald's, Vodafone, everybody, you name it, is going to be fighting for that little piece of your glasses. Because the idea here is that we combat information overload by giving people information that is based upon where they are, because then it has an automatic relevance. I don't have to wade through it. And if you don't think at some point you're going to be walking down the street with a pair of contact lenses or glasses on and go by a store where there's a 2-for-1 sale and have them come up and say, hey, take a left, walk 5 feet, 2 for 1. Well, I think we're being naive. Text to media collage. There's the third big shift. We have not fully grasped the fact that we have new literacies. And art has always been treated as something that's sort of nice, it's an extra, it's really good. I mean, it's good for the soul, so on and so forth. That may be true. However, what I'm talking about is art has a very practical place to play in literacy now, because look at what we've shifted from. We have shifted from black squiggles on a white background, otherwise known as writing, to the new foundational literacy, which is the media collage. And look at all that stuff that's there. You've got video and images and so on, and God knows what's coming down the pike. But if you want to be literate, you have to be able to write that. And this is beyond art's good for the soul. This is if you want to communicate in a global culture, a global society, in which specific languages are sort of losing their punch because there's so many languages out there. New languages are coming on board, the language of pictures and the language of movement and color and design and so on and so forth. And then the last of these, of the building blocks, is the whole digital citizenship thing. And I will be talking in depth about the text to media collage in one of my breakouts, and then digital citizenship in the other. But for now, let's go here. Here's your new word for the day, screezel. I take screen and easel and I put it together. This is where we paint now. And I'm not saying we shouldn't paint traditionally. Absolutely. I'm not suggesting that we get rid of any art forms that exist. Keep those. They're good. They're good. But this is where a lot of kids go to paint now, because they can do something that heretofore you could not do if you were an artist. You can erase. Ever tried to erase an oil painting? I mean, it's difficult, but now anybody can get in there and give it a go. She's on 2 screezels at once. Now, you look at that and say, big deal. Just remember that if you were walking through a park and saw that 20 years ago, you'd probably phone the cops. That's just odd behavior, not anymore. And Screezel 3, which is television, and Screezel 4, which is the movie theater. And these people like what they're seeing so much, they're illegally downloading it. That's being caught by a monitoring system. That is being beamed over to Big Brother. Apparently those eyeglasses exist. He's put out an APB to all his field operatives, one of whom is in an off-track betting parlor. Another one is in Second Life, and I don't know who that guy is. Screezels, they're absolutely everywhere. And here's the bottom line. Literacy has always meant consuming and producing. The media forms of the day, whatever they are. If all you can do is read and you can't write, you are half literate. Well, something happened about 10 or 20 years ago, depending upon how geeky you are. And that is the media that we assumed we would never be able to write because we didn't own TV stations and radio stations and so on, suddenly showed up on our computers. And now, I don't need to tell you, you can go to a department store for $200, you can get yourself a video camera, you can go home, plug it into your broadband, and you can be a TV station. So now we can write the media forms of the day. And what are we going to do that? Because we want students to be able to write well, whatever it is they read. The bottom line is this. When my teachers said, your homework today is, I assumed it would look like that, what you're looking at up on the screen. Now, it could look like that. And that's sort of my generic metaphor for the media collage. But you get the idea. The science of being a good teacher these days is knowing a number of technology and methodologies, and the art is knowing when to use which. And you have so many choices now, so many choices, that you don't have to say, I want you to write a paragraph. You actually get to sit there and say, is writing the best approach here? Maybe if we're studying gravity, I should have him make a movie. It's really a whole new ballgame. And then there's all the stuff that's coming down the pike. And I mean, it's multisensory, and it's holographs, and it's everything. And God knows what we're going to do with that, but we are going to plug it into the media collage, whatever that is. That brings me to the 10 digital literacy action guidelines, and I'm going to look at a few of those. The first is the shift from text-centrism to new media collage. Talked about that. Here's what we didn't expect. We now value writing more than ever. Do you know why? Because good media is based upon good writing. So writing might not be the default, and because of that, we get to discover its true power and value. I will tell you, I have helped students make over 5,000 pieces of media. And if I had to put all that media into 2 piles, the good pile and the not so good pile. And I had to come up with one criterion to distinguish those. It would be this. Good media, the good pile, the stuff in the good pile was based on good research and good writing. Writing, writing, writing. If it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. In the immortal words of George Clooney, that great American philosopher, one time he was asked, George, what makes a great movie? He said, I have no idea, but I'll tell you what I do know. I can take a great story and a great script and turn it into a bad movie any day of the week. What I can never do is take a bad movie and a bad script and turn that into a good movie. I don't care how much money you give me. So value writing, and we have different kinds of writing. We're looking at visually differentiated text there on the right. That's the same information presented on the left. It's what I call web writing. We need more visual toeholds. We need ways to scan information, so on and so forth. And we want to value writing, of course, for media, and I'll talk about that in one of the other sessions. Adopt art as the fourth R. I've been talking about that. Let's just get very clear. She needs to be able to wield the pencil, and she needs to be able to wield Photoshop if she's to be completely literate, and at this point I mean in a very traditional sense. Not in a cool, artsy sense. I mean in a very practical sense. It is a very practical literacy at this point. And boy, do I struggle with that in the United States. Literacy is all about reading, writing, and arithmetic. We just had the Common Core come out. I was asked to write an article about that, and I basically said, you just don't get it. There's more than words and numbers. There's artifacts we make that are just as demanding in terms of being literate as words and numbers. Anyway, don't get me started. We want to follow the Tao of literacy. And the Tao of literacy is that. We want to bring together those four literacies, the ability to speak, create art, write, use digital tools, math, research, oracy, writing, technology. I mean, it's all there. These are the kinds of things we could do. And by the way, the Google version of Excel will allow numbers to move. If I have a pet peeve about math, the way at least it's taught in the U.S. is it's taught as something that's very, very static. When you do it right, numbers move. Math moves. And while we're at it, I'm going to rant a little bit more about mathematics. I showed that picture to a friend of mine, and he said, Jason, you look like a constipated ostrich. Math used to be all about solving for x. It's not about solving for x anymore. It's about dealing with huge, huge data sets. And I work with middle school students, so that would be 8th and 9th grade, in terms of coming up with mathematical data visualization schemes to describe their personal networks. There's one done by a graduate student. I mean, they're absolutely beautiful. And I go into a little bit of this in the digital citizenship presentation. There are other approaches to mathematics that we're just ignoring. It's not all about solving for x. And while we're at it, my rant continues. Every skill related to the use of numbers that is now important to me after having left high school beyond basic algebra, I have had to teach myself. And I don't get that. Mortgages, stocks, running a business. We want our kids to be entrepreneurs. Let's give them the math to be entrepreneurs. They're not going to get that bisecting circles. They're going to get that in a very different kind of mathematics, and we just won't take them there. We want to give every kid a chance to be a scientist. I understand that most of them are not going to be scientists, and they deserve options. The attitude is the aptitude. That is Digital Literacy Action Guideline number 5. And here's what I mean by that. We're at a very special point in history in which your love of learning, the degree to which you really enjoy learning, determines how smart you are. That's new. That's different. The degree to which you are willing to learn new things and sort of jettison old things you don't need and sort of bring it into your core of who you are, sort of do that kind of psychic mashup that happens every time some new piece of technology comes out that changes everything. Your ability to do that will determine your intelligence. That's different. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. True, true, true. We have now personal and social literacy. We used to think of literacy as an entirely personal pursuit. I remember being tested for literacy. Some guy, doctor somebody in a bow tie, would come in and he'd give us a test, and then they'd call our parents and say, this is how literate your kids are. It's not that way anymore. It starts that way, but we now pursue literacy together. And I see lots of students teaching themselves visual literacy, media literacy, and so on, because largely we don't do it. You guys do. You guys do a better job of that. I'm sure there are people out there going, oh, we should do an even better job. I'm sure you should. But I come from a country where they don't do it at all. Then we have two that I'm going to take together, develop literacy about the impacts of digital tools and about the information we consume. That is at the heart and soul of that book right there and presentation this afternoon. Here's what we know. Everything's changing. It's going to keep changing. It's boring to say this, I realize that. But we're in a period of exponential change. And things are changing the very essence of what it means to be a human being. Let me show you one. This is 40 seconds long, and this is old news. This is a year and a half old at this point.
We're here today to announce the first synthetic cell. A cell made by starting with the digital code in the computer, building the chromosome from 4 bottles of chemicals, assembling that chromosome in yeast, transplanting it into a recipient bacterial cell, and transforming that cell into a new bacterial species. So this is the first self-replicating species that we've had on the planet whose parent is a computer. It also is the first species to have its own website encoded in its genetic code.
No big deal, just making people. What would you like? Better rugby player? A little taller? I wrote a science fiction piece one time about an era in which kids grow up to sue their parents for not giving them the genetic therapy that could have made them better athletes and better looking. I mean, I just think these things are possible. We're just, I mean, it's changing so fast, and the potential, and if that doesn't grab you, how about this? Let your imagination go to work. It's exactly what you think it is. This is a real machine. And so he has wrapped his lips around one end of that, and on the other end of an internet connection, there is someone with another one, with whom no doubt he has a deep and lasting relationship. And if that seems a little bit hokey to you, imagine version 3.0. So in my book, about digital citizenship, I imagine an ideal school board. Because the reality is right now we're playing whack-a-mole. Do you guys have whack-a-mole here? Okay, you have to go into sort of a seedy bar to find one of these, and if you don't understand what that reference, how about Twister? We're playing Twister with all the issues that come along in digital citizenship, when what we need to do is create something much more foundational. I mean, by all means, deal with cyberbullying, deal with all those things. Those things are very, very important, but we are going to live to regret it if we don't go after mission statements like this. Students will study the personal, social, and environmental impacts of every technology and media application they use in school. Looks harmless enough? I can't find a school that has that as a mission statement. Maybe you have them here. I don't see any in North America. And that is exactly what we need if we're going to build those kinds of digital citizenship programs that don't just sort of bob and weave every time a new technology comes along and invents a new behavior. Okay, it's sort of like dealing with every new disease comes along rather than dealing with what kind of diet we should have to begin with. The reality is we want kids to understand that technology connects and disconnects. Every technology connects and disconnects. That is a great example, that machine right there, the microwave. Typically, we buy technologies for their connective properties. That is, they do something for us. And we don't really realize the disconnective properties until long after we have incorporated it sort of into the mainstream of our lives, and it's usually too late to do something about it. But that machine right there has obsolesced the necessity for family dinner. I'm not saying there aren't great reasons to have family dinner, but they're not technical anymore. They're completely a matter of choice. When a 5-year-old can pop something in a machine, hit a couple of buttons, and make dinner, we don't have to have dinner anymore. And let me tell you how that plays out in real life. We bought a house 3 years ago. There was a lot on the market. We probably went through 80, 90, 100 houses. There was just lots of choices out there. And I began to recognize a pattern. The older homes had dining rooms. The newer homes didn't. They had feeding troughs attached to the kitchen. The dining room had been replaced by a family room. The focus of the family room was a large screen TV. So that one place where we used to come together to talk, where my old man used to say to me every day, "So what'd you learn in school today?" That room had been replaced by a room in which if you go in there and start talking, people say, "Shh," because they're watching a movie. It's very interesting how it all plays out. Every technology connects and disconnects. I like to work with students in this regard. We do all sorts of interesting projects. Checking my time. Okay, let's see, I'm going until noon. So, okay. No, just kidding. So I was working with a group of 7th graders, and I love not just problem solving, I love students to be problem finders. Go find me a problem. Well, they had identified that the digital manipulation of photos in magazines and on the web was a problem. And I don't know whether any of you have recognized this, noticed this. It sort of happened when we weren't looking. But we have gone from a culture that demands that photos be accurate and honest and untouched to one in which if they're not touched, retouched, modified, they look unprofessional to us. And we would rather have the professional lie to the unprofessional truth. And that's just sort of a shift that's just sort of happened, and here we are. So they said, we need to do something about this. So I gave them as an example a photo of me. That's me, long before I artificially dyed my hair gray to give myself that professorial ambiance. And that was one of the first JPEGs that went up on the University of Alaska system. And there I am, and you can see my hands in my pocket, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? That doesn't look very professional. So I pulled out Photoshop version 2.0. For you geeks out there, imagine Photoshop without layers. Yeah, you hear a couple of people go, "Oh my God." Yeah, no kidding. It was ugly. And I did that. No big deal. So let's make sure you understand how that, okay, so, okay. What are we going to do about that? Well, I'll tell you what these kids came up with. They said, we need to have a system in which we have a number, 1 through 10, in the lower right-hand corner of every photo you see on the web that gives you an indication of the degree to which it's been changed. I think it's a fabulous idea. And I remembered thinking to myself, okay, that'll never happen. And then France, a couple of years ago, had someone introduce a bill into Parliament asking for a warning label on model magazines to say that this cover has been digitally modified because this member of Parliament had come out of the eating disorder business and had watched teenage girls starve themselves to look like models on magazines who had been so photoshopped as to be anatomically impossible. And I'm not sure what happened to that. But you know, it just means that we can do those things. Just get out there and do it. And also in digital citizenship this afternoon, I will talk about positive digital footprints, which I think is probably one of the only weapons we have left. against being overwhelmed by the web. I mean, you're not going to hide anymore, so you better put the stuff out there that you want people to find, and then we'll talk about a bunch of digital citizenship activities that I have. But here's my point here. When do we talk about this? When do we talk about these life-changing technologies? Do we talk about them in school? Maybe you guys do. I don't see it in American classrooms. Do 13-year-olds naturally gather and say, you know what, I think Facebook's changing our essential humanity, and we should stop this right now? And think, I don't think so. Do you talk about it at home with your kids? I hope so. I hope it's a normal conversation for you to say, so what'd you do on Facebook today? But I don't think that's the case. Maybe at church. I don't know. The bottom line is we don't talk about the things that are really changing us, and we need to do that. Okay, and number 10 is we need to harness both report and story. Let me show you a couple of examples of the kinds of storytelling I do. I do green screen storytelling. There is Hannah Davis. She's an Alaska native, and she is performing her own story in front of a green wall. Everything I do is very low budget. I assume teachers have no time and no money, and I'm usually right. And so that green wall was made with a can of paint that cost $20. And you can do those kinds of things. You know, it doesn't have to be high-end. She then created her own artwork on, regular sheets of paper with crayons, and then in post-production went like that. And in the end, what you have is she's performing an original story in front of original artwork. And then I also do a lot of digital storytelling with students in which I use voiceover narration. So this is much easier and sort of folds into the flow of a regular school day much, much easier. So we're looking at pictures or video, and the student is then narrating what you see, and that should be a normal literacy at this point. That should be just as normal as writing a paragraph. So we're going to explore a story a little bit with a little bit of time I have left, and I'm going to do that by telling you a story. We're going to pull it apart a little bit. And then we're going to look at some of the elements and how I approach this. Okay, so here's the story I'm going to tell you. Many years ago, I wrote a novel about the future of technology and learning called Then What? In that, the protagonist is that young man right there. His name is William Tell. At 16, he ends up being chief information officer for a Fortune 500 company because someone from that company, a headhunter, a talent scout, had come to his high school computer science fair and watched him, for his final project, break into his principal's Visa card information in public, download it, and run a character analysis based on his spending habits. He didn't really like his principal. But instead of going to jail, they just said, get him out of school. And he ended up working at this Fortune 500 company, and then through a series of events, he ends up being CIO. So this is a little snippet from that book in which he is doing the dog and pony show for the corporate picnic. This is that day where all the aunts and uncles and spouses and kids show up just like you are. They sit here and they come to corporate headquarters and somebody puts on a dog and pony show, and then they have Kool-Aid and hot dogs and so on. They call it a day. Well, he's here to show the brand new web page that he's been developing for this corporation. But he's got a problem. He can see it on a screen, but he can't see it up there. Oh, God. All he sees up there is what those of us who speak for a living call the blue screen of death. And he is just plugging things in. He's trying to he can't figure it out. And he is sweating so profusely that the sweat is rolling down between his clothes and his skin, collecting in his shoes, making them slosh as he walks. He looks out and he sees an entire row of adolescent young men with their baseball caps turned sideways, and they're chanting, "Loser, loser." He is about ready to give up when up to the stage comes little Jennifer Lewis, 12, 13, thick glasses, pigtails. She looks up at him and says, "Mr. Tell," his name's William Tell, "Mr. Tell, if you hit escape F12 3 times, it'll reroute through COM-port 2 and come up just fine. It's a Vista thing." Now, the psychic tectonic plates are grinding away. He is not going to let some little girl tell him how to fix his computer in public. Are you kidding me? I'm a little busy right now. Yeah, I'm sure you downloaded yesterday's patch. Well, that had a bug in it, so you had to go get the patch from this morning, and that fixed that bug, and it'll work just fine. I'm a little busy right now. Do you even know where the escape key is, Mr. Tell? Yes, I know where the escape key is. Now, 2 rows, adolescent young men, baseball caps, loser, loser. A woman in the front row says, well, Madge, let's go get ourselves a drink. No wonder we didn't get a bonus this year with bozos like this driving the bus. And as he watches people get up to leave and he looks down at the little girl and he searches his heart that for some reason is having a very difficult time accepting her advice, he hits escape F12 3 times and up it comes. And he thanks her. And from then on, whenever he has a tech problem, he goes to find a little girl to give him a hand. Now, I told you that for a couple of reasons. Number one, if I could show you a pie graph that showed you, that proves scientifically, conclusively, by some of the best brains in the business, the kids helping adults with their technical issues was a great methodology to use in a classroom, you forget it tomorrow. But I could call each one of you in a month and say, remember that story I told? And every one of you would go, oh yeah, about the little girl. Yeah, with the glasses, oh yeah, the Vista thing, yeah. That's how story works. Story lodges. Lists of information don't lodge, stories lodge. And it's just fascinating to me that in an age of information overwhelmment, we are now reaching into antiquity and grabbing the most ancient form of information containment, the story, to use that to help us in this situation. I'm also telling you this because if William Tell found that it was just a cord that he had to plug in and everything worked fine, would we have a story? No, you wouldn't have a story. You wouldn't have the tension resolution you need. If the little girl had said, hey, you know what? You should hit escape F12, and he looked down at her and said, yeah, good idea, and he didn't work, would you have a story? No, because you wouldn't have transformation. And that is what I look for. That is the story core, and that is what I look for in every piece of media that students make for me. I want to see some kind of challenge, obstacle, problem that needs to be addressed somehow, and I need to see that somebody has changed, learned something, realized something, grown in some way, and that can come in many, many forms, but that's what I look for. And the story core in education is basically the same thing, but it's inquiry, discovery, and learning. I'm going to show you a piece of media right now. 2 minutes, a math story done by 4th graders. And I'm going to ask you a question. By the way, the best way to keep kids alert when you're showing them videos and so on is to say, we are going to discuss this question at the end of this video. Otherwise, I watch them, and the body language is like this. Hi, we're going to watch something on the screen. And in their mind, their feet are up on the coffee table and they're looking for a bag of chips, right? And you don't want that. You want them sitting forward, engaged. So you say, here's the question, piece of paper and a pencil, take some notes. That's how they need to watch TV, movies, and video, and so on. So here's your question. What happens that takes this from a list of information points and turns it into a story? 2 minutes long, math story.
How to animate a rolling ball. First you need an ocean. Next you need a beach. You also need a beach ball.
To animate a ball in 3D, you have to understand your directions.
Not north, south, east, and west. For example, left and right is the x-axis. Up and down is y. In and out is z. Right now the ball is at point P on the x-axis. To move the ball from left to right, you have to increase the value of P. Let's add 6 units to the x value of P.
Oops, that doesn't work. The ball should roll as it moves.
We know that a ball rolls the length of its circumference in one rotation.
To calculate the circumference of a sphere, use the formula 2 pi r.
We will use the value 3.14 for pi.
The radius of our beach ball is 10.24 inches.
Doing the math, then the circumference is 64.31 inches.
That means we rotate the ball 360 degrees, and at the same time we move the ball 64.3 inches to the right.
Voila, the ball rolls.
By the way, that was done by Glenn Bledsoe and his students. He's just a real leader in this area. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. So what was there that turned it from a list or a report into a story? I'm running out of time, so I'll give you the answer. There was a problem. Please notice this. There didn't have to be a problem. We could have said, here is the math of a rolling ball, blah, 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 blah. Done, we're out, you'd forget it tomorrow. But when that ball skidded across the sand, each one of you in your own way goes, well, what are they going to do about that? And that's how story works. I am now emotionally invested in the information set. I want to know what's going to happen next. And notice that it looks a lot more like real life and real learning. And notice how it stands in complete contrast to simply getting the right answer. I think when you focus on how kids learn, get them to document their learning process, you get sort of a portal into who they are and how they learn, number one. And number two, you turn education from a bunch of reports into a bunch of stories, and they inherently like that. Okay, let me move to the end here. So, how do I do this? How many people here use storyboards? Okay, I'm going to try and talk you out of those. So if you come to my digital storytelling section, I will try to talk you out of that. All they do is get in the way. I use story maps, which give sort of plot information on top of the story core. And that's one right there. That's called the visual portrait of the story. Story advice. I have one piece of advice to give you at this point, and that is don't give an A for anything that moves on the screen. And I can't tell you how often I see this. I see teachers, well-meaning teachers, they see the students have created media, something's moving, and they get the big eyes. They go, they give them an A, and they back away from the computer. And I understand what's going on. It's all very well-intentioned. I don't know how to do that technically. Therefore, I need to give them an A. Rubbish. In a land where you teach media literacy, all you need to do is be a discriminating consumer of media and have the guts to say, you know what, that doesn't work, that music's too loud, I can't hear what you're saying, you're talking about a dog, I'm looking at a picture of a cat. I can't tell you how many times I have been dealing with students and I get the sense that I'm the first adult on their turf because they want me to go, that's cool, and I often don't. I often say, I don't understand what you're doing here. Here's how we can fix this, and so on. And also, analyze, evaluate, assess everything they produce in the process of creating media, not just what ends up on the screen. There's all that research and writing, and so on and so forth. Okay, some advice ahead. I'm going to end with some advice. Oh, there's my grandkids. How did that get in there? That is Sullivan on the left, and that is Declan on the right. Everyone say, aw, aw. Okay, back to work. What do teachers want from administrators? They want what I call the CARES system. Compensation, assistance, recognition, extra time, support for a risk. Those are the things as I talk to teachers and they say, well, you know, I would do this cool thing in technology if I just had something. And when I drill down, you know, the one that they really, really, really want and can't get any other way, that's support from administrators to take a risk. That's the one thing they can't buy their way out of. So if they've got a great idea to use a wiki in biology or whatever it is that they want to do, they need to go get an administrator to turn the switch on for Google Docs or for Blogger or for whatever it is that they want to do. They can't do that on their own. Be a door opener if you're an administrator. And I'm not saying you need to open the door for everybody all at once, but go find that 10 to 15% of the teachers who have great ideas and open the door for them. And then when they prove themselves, you're going to want to open it for other people. I'm fine with that approach. Turn concerns into goals. How often we have seen this. Now imagine this situation with me. There's 8 educators, 8 teachers. They're sitting at a table. They've got a great idea on the table. They're going to use YouTube and Wikipedia and this and that. And they're going to have kids make digital stories about local issues based on research and so on. And then they're going to port this over to Facebook, and they're going to do that and that and that. 7 out of 8 thinks this is just a fabulous idea. And then there's Bob. And if your name's Bob, I'm not picking on you, then there's Ron. And Bob says, I have concerns. And you know what happens, don't you? Everything grinds to a halt. We don't want to be insensitive. Bob's got concerns. And it's very difficult to deal with that statement. Here's the deal. A concern is just a negatively stated goal. That's all it is. So, Bob, what is your concern? Well, I'm concerned the kids aren't kind of right enough because they're doing this media stuff. Great, we have a new goal. Bob, we're going to use your rubric for writing, and we're going to fold that into the overall goal of the project. You good? We set? Well, I don't know. Bob? Well, okay, and then vote. And it may be 7-1, but at least you don't keep your kids from getting the education they deserve because Bob has concerns. I'm going to close with this. Are there any cautions here? Sure, there's cautions here. There's cautions with all technology. We are going to have, because we're all going to be expected to do video conferencing, digital makeup. I'm not kidding. We're going to have jewelry makeup. We're going to have shaving filters. So you go into a video conference, you just didn't have time to shave. Looking good. You're going to have feigned attention and canned laughter. You're going to be able to program your iPhone so that when you're on a video conference, every time your boss tells a joke, she's going to hear you say, it's a great new world. So I actually, last week, following a reunion of sorts, had to do a video conference, and there was no way I was going to recover from it. And I thought, well, I've got a beta version of this. Why don't I try it? I mean, it's sort of a now or never thing. And of course, if money is no object, you know, whatever you do, please go tell your story. Thank you very much.